Get ready to plunge into the electrifying world of tech news with the Next Tech Check podcast. Hosted by SmartTech Research's Mark Vena and NextCurve's Leonard. This podcast offers bold insights, controversial debates, and monitors the pulse of innovation. It's the only podcast committed to keeping what's next in tech in check.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vena, CEO and Principal Analyst at SmartTech Research, and I'm joined by Leonard, Founder and Executive Analyst. That sounds so important. At NextCurve. Welcome to the Next Tech Check podcast. Today is Friday, October 20th, 2023. Both of us were traveling this week in various places. We're gonna get into that in a second. You were on vacation again in, I think, Raleigh, if I'm not mistaken.
Vacation? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, I do. I call it vacation. I call it an analyst vacation.
Yeah, where you don't decompress, but you get compressed with way too much information. Yeah.
Basing your post, you had an enjoyable and I think a very good week in terms of getting to learn a little bit about our friends at Lenovo. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, it was great. Lot of conversations, a lot of learning at Lenovo, and not just gaining insights into Lenovo as a company, but the industry overall, right? Because that's one of the cool things about being an analyst and having analyst access to these companies and their leadership is that you get confirmations and affirmations of some of the points of views or hypotheses that you might have of the market and technology, and so it's really great. And they put on a really great program. They put a really good program for the analysts, and this year they had the leadership from around the world in attendance, which for them, apparently, usually I go to the devices or the intelligent devices group sessions or analyst councils, but this year they expanded it for the whole company, right? So you had ISG there, which is the Infrastructure Solutions Group, as well as the newly formed Solutions and Services Group there. And then corporate, right? And so, it was a blast for me because I cover so many things, and being exposed to all of Lenovo was really awesome. Yeah.
Well, so that's an indication to me that when they bring in their global leadership in, that's an indication to me that they really want to get a very candid and frank assessment of what's going on in the market. And the analyst community, obviously, is a great source for getting that kind of non-filtered material. So, kudos to Lenovo for bringing those folks in.
And we ask like hard questions, or at least I do.
Oh no,
it's really cool.
You're pretty shy. But let's start with what I was doing early this week. I was in wonderful Las Vegas for 3 days, attending Calix's ConneXions 23, a partner event. For those people who don't know, Calix is a multi-billion-dollar communications company. That's a very interesting communications company in that their forte really is focusing on broadband service providers across the country that are very small and provincial. They're not the Comcast. They're not Thomas Conrad or some of the other big broadband service providers. They cater with broadband service providers who have geographies in Montana and places where it's hard to get internet access, and the community might only be 20 or 25,000 people. And they've done extraordinarily well focusing on that part of the market. They had a really interesting event. They dubbed it Giant Stepped Higher, because they're all about, hey, how do we improve our business, our partnership with you year over year? What's really intriguing that came out of the session, and I was fascinated with this, is that they're really good about trying to measure the success of their broadband service providers with NPS, Net Promoter Scores, which is a common methodology metric for measuring how you're kind of doing with your customers. And they showed me some shocking data. I mean, essentially, they're showing me that they're getting Net Promoter Scores in the when I say they, the broadband service providers who are our Calix partners are getting scores in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is shocking because the entire cable industry is under zero. Frankly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'll be very honest with you. The only guys that I can use, I use Comcast, and I have kind of a love-hate relationship with them. Mostly, it's hate, to be honest with you, and I won't get into that. But the reality is that Apple, as kind of a comparable benchmark, and it's probably hard to do an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah,
but they have a net promoter score in the 50s, which is actually quite good for a hardware company. So anyway, they have a very strong relationship with these broadband service providers, and from a strategy standpoint, they're now the two major themes, which I'm really quite supportive of, is that their big message to these broadband service providers is, first of all, you can't depend entirely on speed being your kind of only value proposition. I mean, to race to 1 gigabit, the race to even faster speeds. If you're not offering value in terms of managed services, which is really a forte of Calix, you really, you're really not doing justice to yourself in terms of trying to differentiate yourself with subscribers. So it was a very pervasive theme that went throughout the conference. And the other thing two other things, and then I'll let you ask whatever questions you might have, is that the interesting thing is that they really have built themselves around, first and foremost, Calix themselves do not want to be the face to the customer. They want the broadband service provider to be the face of the customer, because the BSP really owns that relationship. They understand the unique requirements and needs of these customers that are in very rural parts of the United States, which I think is refreshing and interesting. And to that end, what they do a really nice job of is providing a host of really interesting services to the BSPs in terms of customizing their business. So, for example, they have and I won't get into a lot of detail, but they have something called Calix Marketing Cloud, which essentially is a tool that broadband service providers can do to customize their website, provide content to a customer, so it's much more personal and much more customized. And now the interesting thing is now they're starting to broaden. Calix is broadening their services into things like the smart town, this concept that when you go into a town, if that organization or company within the town doesn't have internet service, you can. It's kind of like what Amazon does with their sidewalk capability, but they allow people a small town to provide broadband coverage for free, which is nice. And that allows them to pursue smart business opportunities. Now they're getting into smart MDU, multi-dwelling units, because believe it or not, people have apartments have internet requirements as well, and very often smart home requirements. So they're really clicking on all fronts. It's one of those conferences you go to, and you've gone to these all the time, Leonard, where you hear a lot of BS and you hear a lot of, frankly, a lot of obfuscation on what the company's doing. So I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised, and they really put their customer, which is this broadband service provider entity, they really put them up front. They really did a nice job. So it was 3 days well spent. I'm very interesting in terms of what they'll be rolling out in terms of allowing these BSPs to go after apartments, because that's a humongous opportunity for cable operators to go after. So it was interesting. It was 3 days well spent. And the good news is I didn't really lose a lot of money gambling. So that was also a positive thing.
Yeah, I actually bumped into Calix at Mountain Connect earlier this year. I think it was in August. Yeah, August. And so I had a chance to talk to them. Really cool company. The way I look at them, they're kind of like a BSS CRM for like you said, the rural broadband. They had a pretty cool platform. They walked me through some of the modules, and the WISPs need these systems as well, and I think they tuned into a really important market. Did you hear a lot about BEAD? The BEAD program, and were there a lot of customers there looking at what Calix could do to help them with these new broadband services that will start to get stood up as part of the the BEAD program to bridge the digital divide and bring broadband to everyone in the rural areas or unconnected and unserved areas?
It was certainly a theme. The more prominent theme was they've built two very strong relationships with two companies that most people know about. Arlo, the smart security camera company, they have a really interesting partnership that allows BSPs to provide Arlo solutions in a very integrated type of manner vis-a-vis the Calix app, which I thought was intriguing. But they also have, and I'm not a parent, but if you're a parent, and there are a lot of parents out there, you'll appreciate this. And they have a very strong relationship with a company called Bark, which allows parents to essentially install an application on a kid's iPhone or Android device and monitor their day in and day out internet interactions for all kinds of bad and nefarious type of stuff. Yeah. And apparently the other thing that was kind of interesting is apparently a BSP could deploy that. This is shocking, very shocking. By the time they engage with Calix, if a BSP says, you know what, we want to offer this as a service to our subscribers in a part of Wyoming, for example, Calix claims that BSP can be up and running, offering that capability in less than 7 days, which, as someone who's worked for a very, very big company, that's really hard to do, given all the traps you have to run and all the other kind of administrative and testing things you have to do. And the reason why that's so important is that if you look at the profile of their typical BSPs, they don't have 30,000 people like Comcast does in terms of that, in terms of marketing capability. And so they're very small companies. I mean, it's not uncommon the BSP to have 10 or 15, 20 people in the company, and they have to rely on Calix and their tools from a marketing back-end standpoint, from a tool qualification standpoint. So they really lean on Calix for all that kind of support and help. And again, I think it's interesting that the big theme is if you're a BSP and you focus on nothing but your value add is signing up for really high speed internet, because as you know, the threshold for high speed internet has been going up over time until we start to see applications that require much more higher levels of bandwidth. If you've got a 300 or 400 megabit connection, that's actually pretty damn good for most people. Now that might change over time when AR and VR kicks in, and you might have a lot more thirst for higher speeds over a gigabit. But they recognize that if a BSP focuses purely on that as, hey, this is why you sign up with us, that's probably not a significant differentiator for you to create that stickiness that these BSPs are after, day in and day out. A good BSP, you want to have a relationship with your customer that's going to span 5, 10, 15 years. You're not looking for a casual transactional relationship. So kudos for Calix for concentrating on that side of the business. So
cool. Yeah.
So that was my week there. And again, I didn't come back totally pleased of money. But how was your talk to me about the Global Industry Analyst Day? I have not been to one with Lenovo yet, and I know they're generally all these big events, HP, Dell, they all put on good dog and pony shows.
Yeah.
But what impressed you?
Yeah, this was more of an analyst event, right? So there was probably about, I'd say almost 50 analysts that typically cover all the different aspects of Lenovo. The IDG council tends to be smaller. It's probably about 15 to 18 people. And so when we attend those, it's obviously a smaller group that's like less than half the size, but we, as I mentioned before, all of Lenovo is represented, and it was just really nice not to from San Diego. There's no direct flights, But yeah, we spent 3 days there. They packed our agenda. We got they kicked off the day with YY, who is the CEO, the global CEO of Lenovo, giving an overview of the state of the business, what he thought the industry drivers and market drivers are going to be for 2024, what Lenovo anticipated. And as you know, maybe not everybody knows, the PC market has been struggling. Mobile, I mean, we've seen a year-over-year quarterly declines it's been really tough. And so, and then when you look at the emerging cloud, like hybrid cloud and cloud plays, those have been also growth areas, quite frankly, for a lot of these companies. But then 2024 is a bit of a, let's call it murky outlook for a lot of the players, right? And so it was interesting to get his take on where he thought the market is going, where the opportunities are. Obviously, they talk a lot about AI, and that didn't preclude generative AI. But one of the things I appreciate is that they tended to have a much more grounded perspective on things than I've heard elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And people who know my point of view on this Gen AI stuff, I go down to I'm not dealing with this fluffy crap. I'm down here in the weeds talking to CTOs, engineers about how they're actually using this stuff. How are they using the GPU capacity that's being built out in these hyperscale data centers to entertain the new and support the new Gen AI revolution? I'm talking to these people about this stuff. Right. And I'll say they've been a little bit more tempered about this stuff, which I think is good. How that shapes up going forward, I'd like to observe that a bit more, but I didn't have these hyperbolic conversations that I've had with other vendors as I did with, like Lenovo. Mm-hmm. And then that's like both sides of the fence, whether it's, talking about AI PC or talking about what they're doing on the data center and the edge, right? I think what was a more substantial, let's say, conversation around AI, because everyone's talking about Gen AI, blah, 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 right, is what's happening with like the legacy of AI, right? These companies have been working with their customers on AI for a long time, right? And it's usually for very narrow tactical things that are valuable. And a lot of what we're looking at in terms of like the compute, whether it's storage or connectivity that's going in to support these applications that have been developing for a long time and being built out for a long time. These guys have already been doing this for a while, right? And so now Gen AI comes in and everyone's going crazy about GPUs. That's fine. But the big question out there for everyone, and is what are going to be the sustaining applications that drive that sustaining value, right? And I think what companies like Lenovo are going to do, and hopefully others will start to lean into their legacy of AI, because that's where, from a compute perspective, and architecture, like AI architecture perspective, the benefits of Gen AI is going to be, advancing those things. Whether or not the applications themselves will be generative AI, yet to be seen. But what I think we'll see a lot of benefits come from, or a lot of benefits get directed toward are some of these more traditional classical, AI applications. So anyways, the cool thing is this company, Lenovo, is playing from the cloud all the way down to endpoint devices, be it smartphones or PCs. And so they're in a very, very unique position to really shape what the future of AI computing is going to look like in a practical way. And if Gen AI becomes a revolution, I hope, hey, they'll intrinsically be there. But, fundamentally, they are there to support the evolution of computing toward more of a fuzzy, AI-ish form. So
yeah, let me pick your brain
anyway.
because one area. Well, let me pick your brain for a second. One area that they do continue to innovate in the PC space. It's not like they're walking away from the PC space to focus on. Now the hot category. I mean, it's not really a category yet, but it should be a category at least some point. It's foldable displays. Lenovo has had I think, a very interesting foldable notebook. It's a ThinkPad. And now, of course, HP has now jumped into the fray with their Spectre Fold. What is your perspective on? And it's one of my concerns I have is that, and this is one of the problems that always slows down innovation in the PC space, is this, I call it balkanization, where there's so many. Let's face it, everybody's going to have a foldable notebook of some type over the next 2 years. Everyone's looking for some level of growth. Maybe that's it. Putting the high price points aside, that's one of the problems that's plaguing that space. But and I asked this question when I was at the HP analyst event last week, do you think that innovation gets slowed down because HP wants to implement their working with Microsoft, their usage model version of Windows 11 in a foldable design, because there is all kinds of interesting usage models you can introduce when you have a foldable display. And Lenovo will do the same thing. And unfortunately, the consequence of that is that you don't get traction at a wide level because every guy is doing their own thing. That happened with PC. I know a little bit about that. So do you have a view on that?
I mean, you're tuning into a real big challenge of the non-Apple ecosystems, right? It's that there are too many choices, too many contending standards, and potentially form factors that inject complexity into everything. And then once you have dealing with this complexity, it's hard for brands and the industry itself to coalesce things into something that's scalable, right? And that's where Apple has always had its advantage. And it's not, the thing is that quite honestly, a lot of the players that are in playing the non-Apple playground, I mean, they don't have to play the way that they do, right? They can try to drive more integration designs and offerings that they come up with. And the foldable stuff, I think the biggest challenge there is, like you alluded to it, is the cost. I mean,
$4,000.
Yeah. And then what is really the utility and benefits of these foldable form factors, right? And then what kind of complexity does it continue to inject into the ecosystem, right? Because, and especially if you have all these different flavors, all these different dimensions, and then it puts a lot of pressure on Microsoft and Android, or Android, Google Android, to figure out at a OS level, how do we support the diversity and then still make it performant. And then it's just up and down the stack. You just have layers and layers of divergent priorities, conflicting interests that just make it really difficult for any of the OEMs to navigate.
I mean, and we're going to have to kind of conclude the podcast in about a minute here, but the only thing I can think of, and this will probably never happen, but hope springs eternal, is that just looking at this particular example we're talking about, how do you get industry momentum by getting the 3 or 4 top PC players to play nice and agree to, here are the usage models that we're going to go in unison to Microsoft to deploy. So when you're buying a Lenovo foldable notebook versus an HP one versus, I mean, Dell hasn't really done anything that yet, but eventually they will. is that IT managers don't have to make a decision and say, well, if I buy Lenovo foldable notebooks, I have to have a certain type of user that's going to have to learn distinctive usage models from someone who might buy an HP version. And the only way you overcome that and try to do what Apple does, because Apple, again, speaks with one singular voice, which benefits them, so
yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Any closing comments on the Lenovo meeting?
Yeah. On the devices end of things, they're extremely innovative. I think they really push the envelope of pretty much every category, in particular XR. They've Vishal Shah and his team, they've really tried to define what the frontier of XR is going to be. You know what I'm saying? So it's really quite it's a testament to their commitment to being innovative, right? And I feel that they have a pulse that's closer to what you would see from Apple than any of the other large brands out there. So
I agree with that, and God knows with the PC business being where it is, they need everyone needs all the innovation they can get. That's the only way they're going to get out of this quagmire. But again, listen, Leonard, thanks for taking the time to participate in today's podcast. That was great. Lots of great, insightful comments. For our viewing and listening audience, please make sure that you make the Next Tech Check podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast, or use these convenient on-screen QR codes to connect with us. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at the handles indicated below, along with the handle that good old my colleague has. So again, thanks for your time, Leonard, and we will talk next week.